A new wave of Central American migrants shows up at the border. Tucson churches called on to help house asylum seekers.
Normally, it goes the other way around. The faith-based communities go to the officials and say, you have a problem.
Marana looks ahead to its 2017 priorities.
We're also growing so quickly. We've been the fastest growing municipality in southern Arizona for the last 5 years.
A new effort aims to improve the local economy by improving city business dealings. And we look at the upcoming legislative session and what it could mean for southern Arizona. This is Metro Week. Hi, I'm Andrea Kelly. Thanks for joining us. In 2014, Central American migrants poured across Mexico's borders with Texas and Arizona, seeking asylum from violence in their countries. Their numbers stressed the U.S. immigration system's resources, and now federal officials say another wave is underway. We'll find out more after a look at the week's top stories from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom.
It is now illegal in Oro Valley to talk on cell phones while driving if not using the device hands-free. The ordinance also bans handheld devices like video games. Officers will initially give warnings when citations are issued. The first offense will be $50, a second $100, and a third $200. New county officials were sworn into office this week. Mark Napier took the oath of office as Pima County Sheriff. He's the first Republican Pima County Sheriff in decades after defeating incumbent Chris Nanos. Steve Christie was sworn in as the newest member of the Pima County Board of Supervisors. He replaces Supervisor Ray Carroll, who retired after 2 decades on the board. The number of passengers flying in and out of Tucson International Airport has gone up after the recent addition of new flights to New York and Mexico. Fall is not normally the peak season for people flying in and out of Tucson, but that was not the case in 2016. October and November were 2 of the airport's top 3 months. The number of people flying in October was up more than 5% from the year before and more than 8% in November. January through April is normally the peak season for travel at Tucson International. Arizona public schools will be starting the spring semester with more than 8,300 open teaching positions, according to new survey results from the Arizona School Personnel Administrators Association. That's up slightly from the start of the fall semester. For all of the week's news, you can always visit our website, news.azpm.org.
Central American migrants are again crossing the U.S.-Mexican border in big numbers, seeking asylum from gang violence in their home countries. Federal immigration officials have asked local churches to help house those immigrants. AZPM's Nancy Montoya joins me for more.
Hello. One of the things that we've noticed about the Central American, this new surge, is that officials are saying there's about a 15% increase in Central American families coming to the U.S. from this time last year.
Wow. And those numbers have been up for the past few years, so that is definitely,
yes,
it keeps going up.
It started in 2014, going up by 5%, but this is the biggest jump, 15%. I think one of the really neat things is that they're asking for help. Customs and Border Protection is asking for help. Normally, it goes the other way around. The faith-based communities go to the officials and say, you have a problem. There are people that are being kept in cells. We want them to come out. And this time, it's opposite.
So the federal government made the first move and churches are responding?
Absolutely. My understanding is that a high-level official from ICE, which is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, called up a bishop for the United Methodist Church that oversees southern Arizona and said, we need help. We have too many families, we have too many children, and we need help. So the bishop called 2 churches here in Tucson and said, can you guys help us? Well, those 2 churches went into immediate action. In fact, on Christmas Eve, right after the service, the Reverend told his congregation, here's our problem. Whoever wants to go home, put on your work clothes, come back, because we're going to convert our basement into a safe house for these people.
So these are people who showed up at the border asking for asylum from their home countries, and then what?
Well, there's a process, especially for folks or families who come from Central America. mostly from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. There's been a lot of problems with gang violence there, and the State Department has declared this a reason for offering sanctuary to some of these families. They come to the border, they turn themselves in, they go through a process. Customs and Border Protection decides that, yes, this is a legitimate claim, and they release them at that point if they can prove that they have a place to go to in the U.S. The problem is, and this happened back in 2014, where many of those families were being released at the bus station to fend for themselves. Now, we did have Catholic Social Services that went into action and started a home called Casa Elitas. But they could take in maybe 6, 7 families with their children. There's no room at the inn. And so the Methodists went into action.
So how many are they looking at housing?
Right now they're looking at housing 50 at a time. And when they started this, there was no money. There was no resources. It was on faith alone. And because it happened on Christmas Eve, many of the people at the congregation said, let's call this Project Inn to show that there is room at the inn. And so people went home, they got on their work clothes, they brought things, and now they're getting a little bit of help from outside the community.
What does that mean?
Well, the United Methodist Church, it's the Committee on Relief, has declared Southern Arizona, Tucson in particular, a disaster relief site, and they sent $60,000 earlier this week to the 2 churches, which are undisclosed churches, to buy food. While they can buy food for these people, they still need supplies and they need volunteers.
So you mentioned that these are undisclosed locations. Why can't we publicize where this is happening?
I think there's a lot of fear right now, and there's a lot of anxiety because what is happening politically in our country. The pastors at these churches are saying many of those coming here are in fear for their lives, and they're trying to avoid any problems. So for now, they're not disclosing where these churches are. And we did get a chance to enter the safe house basement, is what we're calling it. And I want our viewers to just look around and listen to what the sights and sounds are of these families. Now, what you would notice as you saw this video, there are no men coming across. These are mothers with children. In this particular case, there were 8 women. 3 of them told me that their husbands had been killed by the gangs in El Salvador. And the rest left their husbands behind because they were afraid. So these women are traveling 2 and 3 months with children in tow. And it does take 2 or 3 months to get to this country.
Wow, so what's going to be next for them after, they're housed for now?
Well, there's a process, again, that they go through. Once they get to the safe house there with the churches, church volunteers make contact with the family members of the people coming from El Salvador or Guatemala. And once they have made contact with them and have secured either a bus ticket or a plane ticket, then they get them to where they need to be. But in the interim, they wait there for 2 to 3 days until this is resolved. They leave and a new group comes in. In fact, when I was there, 4 families were leaving and 5 families were entering.
Wow, thanks for your report on this, Nancy.
Absolutely.
A new year also brings new priorities for many of us, and local governments are no different. Earlier this week, I asked Marana Mayor Ed Honey to talk about goals he and the town council have for the next 12 months.
One of our biggest needs is infrastructure. Our roads are pretty good, but we're looking at a lot of roundabouts in several of our major intersections. We think it's going to be more efficient, more economical, and move more traffic. So we're looking at those. We're building a new wastewater plant. We're building a new police station, and we're kind of a victim of our own success because we're growing so quickly. We need so many more amenities to serve the people.
Now, managing that growth has long been one of Marana's priorities because you are one of the faster growing municipalities. So what type What type of management is unique to Marana? I mean, when you look at those traffic roundabouts, we don't see other communities doing that. So how do you come to those decisions about management?
Well, we look at and see who else is being successful or who else is trying something. We don't have to invent any project ourselves. So we've looked at roundabouts in other major cities that move a lot more traffic than we are, and they've been really successful. And we have several places like in North Marana where we have 4 or 5 roads coming into an intersection. And a roundabout is a perfect way to remedy that situation. So.
Do you get feedback from the public about how it feels different, or are they apprehensive or excited about them?
I think some people are a little apprehensive. They're used to the stoplights and those types of things. But if they see it moves traffic more quickly and it gets them to work or school or wherever they're going in a more efficient manner, I think they'll be very happy with what we're doing.
Talk about the new wastewater plant. Why are you building a new one? Well,
as you know, we had a lawsuit with the county, and we ended up with the North Marana wastewater plant. And our problem is, again, we're a victim of our own success. We're growing so quickly in northern Marana that we needed newer and more efficient facilities. So we're in the process of designing and building about a $20 million plant.
I saw that Marana is working to update its strategic plan. Is growth the central theme of that as well?
It is, but it's quality growth. I think in our earlier days, we would kind of take anything at any time. What we're doing now is you're welcome to come into our community either through annexation, if you have something to offer the community. And we're also growing so quickly. We've been the fastest growing municipality in southern Arizona for the last 5 years.
Are you hearing about the plans for Monsanto to open an agricultural facility near the town?
Absolutely, I've been following it very closely. It's about a half a mile from our airport. And it is not in the Marana town limits. It's about 1/8 of a mile outside in county jurisdiction. But it is in the Marana area. And as this plant is built, most of the people that work there will probably live in the town of Marana and shop in the town of Marana. So it will have a direct effect on us, but we are not involved in facilitating that project.
There's been a lot of opposition at the county level as Pima County starts to hold some public hearings next week on the proposal that it lower the property tax. Marana obviously would not be collecting any property tax if it's outside the limits, but have your citizens, your residents, been talking to you about this plan?
Not really, not a whole lot. And we don't have a property tax. Ours is strictly sales tax that funds our community. And so it wouldn't affect us anyway. And we really haven't had any citizens in Marana that have been upset about the Monsanto plant. I know a lot of the environmental community has gone to the county board and raised concerns about the plant. But for us as a town, we're not really involved with it, so they haven't come to us.
Switching now to the state level, the legislative session is just beginning. What does Marana hope to see in legislation this year at the state?
Well, we've been pretty successful with the state. You know, our representatives, Senator Smith and Representative Fitcham and Leach, are very receptive to Marana, and we talked to them. In fact, I talked to Representative Leach at a meeting prior to coming here, and they've been very good to us. And we don't have any specific needs right now for the state directly. And we're just concerned, they had taken some of our revenue sharing when the state was in such big trouble after the recession. And we're hoping to get all of that money back, not just us, but all the cities and towns.
That includes some transportation funding, right?
Yes.
So how are you funding those roundabouts that you talked about earlier, as you are also still asking the state to up that funding for transportation?
What we do is we have a transportation impact fee for new housing and new business. We also have a construction sales tax on new housing and new businesses, which 3/4 of that goes to road and infrastructure and improvements. The rest comes from general fund. But we spend a lot of money on roads, and we have a 6-year transportation and plan, and every road in the town of Marana is worked every 6 years, either replaced or oiled or redone or whatever we need to do. And I think you'll find driving through our community that we have really good roads in Marana.
So it's really different than some of the unincorporated roads or the city of Tucson roads, which they can't keep up with the maintenance
I'm
of.
not going to make a comment on that, but I think we do a really good job in taking care of our roads.
So you sit on the Regional Transportation Authority.
I do.
Which is also the Pima Association of Governments Board. Right. What do you think you'd like to see in 2017 in terms of regional cooperation?
I think that's probably the place that we have more cooperation than anywhere else in the county, is the PAG and the RTA. It's really two different boards, but all of us are the same members on both boards. I'm the chairman of the RTA this year. We are trying to accelerate projects and get more projects done. And the new Ina Road interchange in Marana is an RTA project. Twin Peaks interchange that was finished about 3 or 4 years ago was an RTA project. And our biggest thing right now is the continuation of the RTA. We're going to look in the next year or two to go back to the voters and ask for an extension for more projects for transportation improvements in the county.
For those who haven't kept up, the plan was a 20-year plan. It approved in 2006, so we're just a little over the halfway point.
Right,
on that.
we're in the 10-year right now. We're ahead of schedule on a lot of our projects as far as getting them done. And we were a little bit short on funding because of the recession. But what we did as a group working together is we have a lot of federal money that comes to PAG, which is kind of the parent organization for RTA. And we voted to put that money in the RTA as well, so that we could get all of the projects done that we promised to the voters.
Mayor Ed Honey, thanks for the update.
Thank you very much for having me.
In the coming weeks, we'll hear from the mayors of Oro Valley and Sahuarita. The city of Tucson has a reputation among business people for being difficult to work with. In recent years, developers and small businesses have complained that licensing and permit approvals took too long and that there were too many hoops to jump through. Now, city and business leaders want to change that. Tucson's mayor and city manager teamed up with several business groups, including the Tucson Metro Chamber, the Metropolitan Pima Alliance, and the Southern Arizona Home Builders Association to work through the issues. The group has come up with 7 steps to boost job creation in Tucson. They range from working to incentivize development on vacant properties, improve the inspection process for construction, modernize the sign code, and foster more communication between businesses and the city council. The theory is these and other steps will help increase economic development and continue the economic improvement that's been slow since the recession to help the metro area prosper. The chairman of this effort, Bill Ossenmacher, joined us to explain how these steps can achieve those goals.
Well, the basis is business leaders have gotten together to talk about how we can create jobs quicker. And so if a firm is having a difficulty either opening a business or getting a permit or moving into a building, it's lost opportunity. So the goal of working with the city government is to look at areas that can speed the process.
And it's people like yourself who have done business in Southern Arizona and might have that firsthand experience.
The chamber has about 1,400 members, but we put a task force together of about 15 to 20 business leaders that are involved in business development as contractors and developers. And we took a look at what were the things that sometimes cause a delay in getting projects open, whether it's a store, a business. And so this is an opportunity to speed the process, which means creating jobs quicker.
Let's talk through some of those individual 7 steps.
Okay.
One being infill. Why did you guys come up with the idea that we need more incentives?
Well, I think everybody realizes how well it's worked downtown. So, for example, if a guy was going to open a restaurant and in downtown they said, we don't need the parking requirements that the code says, we just want you to open your restaurant. So infill means take that concept of try to expedite the process in other parts of the city. So the goal is to use downtown as an example to create infill districts throughout the whole city where we can create opportunity for new businesses.
One of the other items was to quantify business opportunities with the city council. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, a person, when he wants to open a business, the first thing they do is get a business license. The second, they either rent a building or build a building. And so you look at the steps that it requires to get the business open and hire employees. And so it's up to the business people to tell the city sometimes what is onerous and what is keeping them from that opportunity. So the whole process of what we call Project Prosperity is to get the city to work with us on making it easier to get businesses open and hire people in Tucson.
Okay, and then moving to another one, the permitting and inspections item. The city's already been working on expediting that process, so what's new here?
Well, I've been in business over 44 years in Tucson, and I've built 6 buildings, maybe added on to those 6 buildings a dozen times. So I know how difficult it is to fight through what we call red tape at the city. So for the last year and a half, the city has taken heart in trying to streamline the process. They've reduced staff, changed management. They've looked at updating the software by sharing it with the county. They've looked at reducing the permitting time. So it's basically a long-term and maybe an ongoing process to make sure that it doesn't take 6 months to do something you can do in 3 months, or it doesn't take 2 years, something that should take less than a year.
So overall, there's 7 steps, as we said.
Right.
So there's probably a next step for each of them, but can you kind of generally tell me what's next here?
Well, the whole objective was to find something that would be easy to understand and that the measure would be sustainable. Meaning if we said something was black and you could turn it to white, we could say that we've made a change. So the concept behind the Prosperity Project is to define things that were tangible, definable, and when a success was achieved, you could use that success to keep building. So there are more issues we'll deal with the city as an ongoing, and there's also things we'll do with the county too. This is not just a citywide issue.
What about other municipalities?
Well, obviously, we have some surrounding cities that probably are sometimes a little more creative than we are. So, for example, if you were to go look at Marana or Oro Valley, one may say one is more restrictive as one is more business friendly. The goal is to look at sometimes the surrounding areas and see what they're doing, because they're smaller and a little more reactive. So you can get and define the problem much quicker in a smaller community. So it is wise to interact and what you do best practice. Whether it's best practice in Pima County or best practice throughout the state. So we have been reviewing what some of the cities have been doing in Phoenix, and there's definitely a few cities that are ahead of us on issuing building permits.
Now, you're a business person, as we've
Sure.
established, so this matters a lot to you, but what about the people watching who are not owners of businesses or trying to get these permits?
Well, I think the real key here is we want to grow the number of jobs and taxpayers. We don't want to just keep having the city say they need another tax. So we're looking at this as a way to keep the city government lean and effective at what they spend their money on. So this should affect the entire community. So if we get a new employer moving here or an existing employer which adds jobs, that should take a little bit of a burden off every taxpayer or any homeowner, because technically the more revenue we have and the more taxpayers we have, the easier it would be for the city to provide the services, especially in a changing environment. Tucson is going to be growing. We have a lot of new jobs coming, and that will put some pressure on city services.
Bill Ossenmacher, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Taking stock of the new year again, AZPM's Christopher Conover joins me for a look at the next legislative session. Now, Christopher, you've been talking to local governments about what they want to see happen. Let's start with the county. What did you find out?
The county and even the Tucson mayor, who we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, they all want the same thing that the Marana mayor, Ed Honey, who you talked to a few minutes ago, wants, and that's a restoration of those highway dollars. They've been taken and moved to other areas over the last few years, and everybody in the area, and my guess is if we talk to people in Yuma or Flagstaff, they would have say the same thing. They want that money back.
We should remind viewers that that money is money that we spend when we buy gas here, when we register our vehicles, and it goes to the state, but then is supposed to come back to wherever it was, wherever people paid those taxes, and the state has been keeping it to pay for other things.
Right, starting with the recession when the state budget got in such trouble, as many state budgets did. They were looking for extra funding sources to take care of other things, and those highway dollars were one area that they went to. Chuck Huckleberry, the Pima County Administrator, estimates it's a $6 million hit for the region. So that's real dollars down here.
Real dollars that could fix our crumbling roads.
Exactly.
Now, the county also has a proposal for a gas tax. How likely is it that the legislature looks at that?
Honestly, probably slim and none. The gas tax has not been increased since the 1990s, and the county would like to see that discussion revisited and frankly see it bump up a little bit, again, to deal with those roads and infrastructure and things like that, especially since those highway dollars have disappeared over recent years, trying to get some of that money back into the system.
What else, before we move on to the city, what else is the county looking to get out of the legislature this year?
One of the things the county wants to get out is a property tax reduction. Specifically, in recent years, the state has moved some costs to the counties. One of the big things that was moved were jail costs. Some of the things that the state used to pay for that the county now has to pay for to operate the jails. Chuck Huckleberry again says that accounts for a third of the property taxes of Pima County. If the state would take those responsibilities back, Pima County could reduce its property tax. So they're calling on the legislature to essentially reduce the property tax in Pima County. They also want to look at some criminal justice reform. And again, this goes back to the jail and some money savings potentially. They pointed out that criminal misdemeanors, some minor criminal misdemeanors, first offenses, really could become civil violations. They pointed to, for example, driving on a suspended license, first-time offense.
Okay.
Littering, first-time offense. Take that out of the criminal court, put that in the civil court, put a fine on it, and be done with it. It's much faster and ends up cheaper for the county.
That's in line with the county's goals to reduce its jail population in the next few years as well.
Exactly.
So other than transportation funding, what does the city of Tucson want?
The city of Tucson really has a theme. Obviously, as you said, transportation funding, but their theme is local decision making. And Mayor Rothschild said, cities are the place to innovate. They're small, they can do a lot of things that the state can't do, so let the cities have a lot of local decision making without state oversight. And if something works, great. It can be expanded to the county, it can be expanded statewide. If it doesn't work, the cities are much more easily able to change things if ideas don't work. Of course, one of the big things he's talking about is the gun sale issue, which we are stuck in a lawsuit on right now.
Tell us more detail about that.
The city of Tucson, when it seizes guns, and it even did a gun buyback, was then destroying those weapons. The state wants them to put them up for sale and is actually suing the city to stop the destroying of those weapons and wants them put up for sale. The city says, hey, we can do it. We're going to have to wait and see what the courts say on that. But that's an example of local decision making that the city wants to be able to work with. And other things like giving benefits to same-sex partners for city employees, a local minimum wage, things like that. The city says, we know what we need to do for our people. State, you worry about the state, we'll worry about the city.
So I would guess that's not going to find a lot of favor in the lawmakers that have passed these other bills that do force cities to do certain things or not to do certain things.
Mayor Rothschild is very realistic. This is what he wants. He knows it probably won't happen, but they're still going to go up and make that case to the state to see if they can get a little bit of traction. He has some other ideas that he thinks can do better. For example, the city wants to have easier times annexing county areas. Now, some people may say, why does the city want to grow? State shared revenue, which is money that comes down from the state, is based on the number of incorporated citizens in an area. If you live in Pima County, not in the city of Tucson or the town of Oro Valley or wherever, you are not counted as an incorporated citizen. So by incorporating or annexing these smaller areas into the city, the whole area can get more state dollars.
Okay, I'm going to switch topics on you now because I do want to touch on the fact that Sunday, January 8th, is the anniversary of the January 8th shooting in 2011. So there's some legislation that actually, at a national level, could have an impact on Tucson. Tell us what Congresswoman Martha McSally is proposing.
It's Congresswoman Martha McSally, along with our two U.S. Senators, John McCain and Jeff Flake, want to make this a national memorial, which means it would come under the jurisdiction of the National Park Service, which is great for finances immediately and also long-term. The argument from our lawmakers is this affected more than just Tucson, so this should be a national memorial.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that legislation. Thank you, Christopher. Tucsonans on Sunday will commemorate those who died in the shooting. People who gather at High Corbett Field starting at 1 p.m. are asked to wear white. Participants will pose in the shape of the planned January 8th memorial, and photos of the assembled group will be sold to raise money for building the memorial. That's it for us. Next week, a look at the Monsanto company's plans to open a greenhouse in Pima County. Thanks for watching.